Mike, thank you so much for joining me today. Before we get started, I really appreciate your time. I'm very thankful to have you on board for this. Everybody in the project is just so excited to hear from you and gain insight from you.
Awesome. It's good to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. So before we get started with questions from the students, would you mind just giving us a little bit of a brief introduction about yourself, who you are, your experience, what you've done, and where you are at now, and how you got there?
Yeah. So I started interviewing bands when I was in high school. I figured it would be a really easy way to get into shows for free. I was saving up for my first car and I didn't have money and I wanted to see a bunch of bands. So I started interviewing them. And then from there, a bunch of my friends that were in bands started needing somebody to put on concerts for them. And my senior year of high school, I put on my first concert, made some money on the show, and I was like, okay, this is cool. Maybe this could go somewhere. And I mean, that was 2004. So I'm still doing it. Along the way, I started a record label, management company, marketing, just kind of done a little bit of all of it. I recently just built a studio at my house during COVID because
Wow.
why not? I had this like place behind my house. It was like a storage shed and just kind of turned it into a studio. But yeah, I've been doing all of this for about 16 years. Most people probably know me for doing shows in a festival called So What Music Festival. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Now, I know with your company, you've kind of transitioned between starting out here on the West Coast and then you transitioned to Texas, right?
Well, I was born in California and then I moved to Texas when I was 16, and that's when I kind of got into music. But I did go back to LA for a couple years and we did some shows out there and had a couple partnerships and everything, but it was just, LA is just so like, can be frustrating, like the traffic and just the cost of living for like a tiny place and everything. So, plus all of our shows are in Texas for the most part. So I just missed being out here.
Yeah, yeah, I totally get it. The two environments are just so different.
Very different. I mean, before COVID though, I was going out to LA like once a month or every couple months. So it felt like I still lived there. And the big thing about LA is like, everybody feels like you have to live in LA to succeed in music. But the truth is you get more attention when you go back and visit for a week than when you're there the whole time, because everyone's like, oh, well, you're out here, we'll do this another time, or like whatever. Unless you like really need to meet with someone, everyone's time is so valuable. So it's been just as productive to go back for like a week or two, except, this year, obviously.
Pandemic going on. So would you mind telling us a little bit about your company, Third Strings Entertainment, how that started and kind of how you got that process going?
So that was the company that I started in high school, putting on concerts. And we also put a record label under it and a marketing company. And the name came from just the idea of being like the backup, because I was in high school and like, I was like, well, we can't do shows in Dallas because none of the bands are 21 and all the venues wanted 21 and up drinking crowd, and like all ages wasn't super popular. And so I put the shows on in the suburbs, and I was like, you know what, I'm always gonna be like this like underdog promoter that like, is doing these cool shows out in the suburbs, but like isn't quite the, big Dallas promoter. And so that's where the name came from. And it's just kind of stuck the whole time, even though now we're like booking a lot of bigger bands and bigger artists. Like I'd say some of the biggest people that we booked are GE's, Bring Me the Horizon. I don't know, like All Time Low has the #1 song with Black Bear right now. We booked Black Bear when he was Matt Musto. So yeah, it's mostly the entertainment umbrella is mostly shows, and the festival, but we also partner with Emo Night LA to do those events. And then we have a record label of just kind of like bands I like and I want to help out. And then of course the marketing agency that I've always had, but it was under different names, and then just kind of brought it all together.
Wow, that's awesome. I really like how, from a personal standpoint, how diverse you made, like in such a niche company, be able to be so multiverse and well-tasked and versed in different areas. That's
everything just kind of like comes together. Like when you start doing shows, you have to learn how to do the marketing, and then you work with so many bands that you want to be in management. And then when you're managing an artist, they don't have a budget. So you're like, okay, well, I'll start this label and pay for it so that you have the money. but I'm going to need, some money back on that. And that becomes your label. And then with the marketing, like I got really lucky when I was 20 years old. I was co-producing these shows with this company called Buzz Oven, and Business Week did a cover story about them. And the woman found me to be the most interesting part of the story because I was 19 at the time and it came out when I was 20. But she found me to be the most interesting part. And so like the whole thing was basically an advertisement that I know how to use MySpace and Facebook to promote brands and music. And so I started speaking at conferences and like getting hired by these big companies to do their marketing and like teach them how to use social media. And so it just kind of carried out to continuing to do that. And a lot of them were like entertainment related, like headphone companies and bigger promoters and music festivals and stuff. But I mean, we also worked with On the Border on a national campaign, and Coca-Cola, and just random things that weren't necessarily music, but it's still like the same concept of selling something.
Yeah, that just like blows my mind that you've been able to do that in such like within such a small independent company versus being corporate. We don't get to see like small companies really integrate themselves at such a level. So that's awesome. Now in regards to students and what they've been asking, they've been really eager to ask you questions ever since I announced that you were going to be a part of this.
Awesome.
You are super well known, and they were just super excited to hear from you. The first question that I have here is, what are the chances of new businesses in music becoming so well established amongst major companies now buying out smaller ones?
I think it really just depends on like what you're doing. Like if you can be doing something cool and find your own niche, like for us, ours was that we capitalized on all ages shows. We did basically like mini festivals of like, 10, 20, 30 bands that built up into our bigger festivals. And we had this niche of like metalcore and pop punk and just like the whole like Warped Tour world, basically. Like if you were coming to Texas, like we were the people to book that with. And that was prior to us, that was being booked by someone else. We just found a way to bring it more exposure by like, okay, well, nobody really appreciates these shows in the city, so let's do it in the suburbs, and kind of like made it our own thing. In 2020 and 2021 and however, like whatever time period you're looking to start your own company, it's obviously a little more tricky because you do have like Live Nation and AEG being so aggressive and stuff like that. But it's also like, especially in a post-COVID world, it's kind of the best time ever to run your own business and do your own thing, because all of these companies are trying to adjust to not having massive overhead, and not like they're not going to be able to go out and just buy up all these little companies like they were before. Like you could pretty much just send an email to like Live Nation or AEG and be like, hey, this is what I'm doing, and they'd try to put together an offer and like scoop you up. But now like there's so much power in being an independent promoter or an independent business owner in general, because you can do whatever you want at a time where like everybody is making new rules and like albums are being put off because artists can't tour and shows aren't happening. And so I mean, normally I would say like if you had done this a year ago, I'd be like, man, it's very competitive, it's super hard, but like that was kind of like the best time ever to like really go for it.
All right. That's very good to hear from our own perspectives. I know quite a lot of us students out here are trying to navigate, how to, start our own careers from a very independent but collaborative standpoint without having to like integrate ourselves in the corporate system so soon.
I mean, with music or with any kind of business, you just have to look for like what's missing. Like if you live in a certain area and there's bars and restaurants that aren't having live music, or there's, a big park that has a stage and no one's ever using it. Like you kind of have to like visualize what you can do that's not being done, and that's going to be your biggest strength.
Right. Yeah, that's very true. So in regards to, new musicians, new business people, again, with the pandemic going on, how are you continuing to, or how would you recommend networking at this point in time?
For me, it's been a lot of Facebook groups. Like I've really made myself known in like these artist manager groups, and I've been doing a lot of stock trading to like keep myself busy and make money. And so I created a group for that. And there's a lot of music industry people that are in there because we're all kind of in the same boat. But I mean, it like watch panels online and like watch streams and look at what people are offering. And I know that Kevin Lyman just put something together called the Adapt Conference, which was like all about this. I mean, I post things all the time, and I'm like, if I did this, would anyone be interested? Because like, I have all this free time, so like for me, going online and talking about music for like an hour or 2 hours, like that's fun for me. And if that inspires somebody else to like want to be a concert promoter or work in music, then that's great. But I mean, that's like now is kind of the best time to network. And something that I've done that I like never would have thought would be a thing is like I've been using LinkedIn a lot.
Oh, okay.
Finding people on LinkedIn that work at different companies, and the thing that's very beneficial about LinkedIn right now is also their groups and their hashtags, and going on there and like using the live music hashtag or music industry. I've had people from like Live Nation, Ticketmaster, different ticketing companies, different like marketing companies, and all like add and talk to me about like, how are you adapting? How are you handling this? And like people that would have always been too busy to communicate are all online right now, you know, like they don't have anything else to do. And I've done so much networking, and like I've had people from like Florida contact me asking my advice on how to like bring back shows because they can right now, but they don't really want to because no one else is doing it. But I mean, the internet is so full of opportunity right now, whereas normally like none of these people would be on LinkedIn or Facebook. They don't be doing their jobs, you know?
Oh, it's so true. You know, with everything going on and us really being in the unknown of when this is going to, you know, stop at some point, you know, internet is really all we have to, you know, keep being connected and integrated, you know, with being states or even countries apart in a lot of cases.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I could definitely see how that would work. So then, with that being said, with your recommendations on starting a new business and networking, in regards to yourself doing that, what's the best piece of advice that you've received that you would like to pass on to viewers or students watching this?
I mean, I think myself and what I do is like a perfect example of this, but like the best piece of advice I'd ever gotten and continue to get is it's all about the team that you have. Like whether it's, you know, a group of people collectively trying to put together one event, or you're hiring people for your company, or you want to start a business with people, it really is all about like who you're doing it with. Like for me, I wouldn't have all these different avenues if I wasn't building good teams of people. I would lose my mind trying to do everything. I have somebody that is a label manager for me. I have 3 different people that help me with shows, even right now as nothing's really going on. I have 4 different people that help even with my like stock group and keeping up with it. For management, I have a business partner and an intern. Like I build a different team for every idea I have. And I think that it's very important to recognize excitement in other people when you're talking to them. Like you can tell what somebody's passionate about because they light up. And like at that point in time, like that's when you're like, okay, this is what we're going to do together. And then you go and do it because you want to have a motivated team of people that are okay, like not getting paid until something happens. Like if you're coming up with an idea in your bedroom or your garage or whatever, and you're like, this is going to be the coolest thing. Like you have to have people that are that excited and with you. And like, that was one big advantage I had when I was in college, is that I was surrounded by people who quite literally just wanted to smoke weed, sit on laptops, and like figure out how to hack MySpace so that we could promote better. We came up with like bots to hack MySpace and like mass invite every single person in Texas to our events. And we actually got a cease and desist from MySpace, and they said, we're very impressed with your coding and everything, but you can't use our name for your product, because we were selling the bot and calling it MySpace or XP. And like, they didn't say stop hacking our website. They just said change the name. But like, that was what probably made my career, is like having those people around me in college, where like my roommates and everybody else were like going out 2 or 3 times a week, just partying. And we were just like, we're just going to smoke some weed and like stay focused on what we're doing. And like, next thing we know, we've been working for 10 hours discovering new bands. And like, that's how we brought A Day to Remember and Chiodos and like all these bands to Texas before anyone else, because we were just sitting online, clicking around MySpace. Like we booked the first Breathe Carolina show before they'd ever left Colorado. And like, we were the first people to get Jeffree Star to ever do a show, and like just so many like cool things, just because we were sitting on MySpace, like finding people. And like, we still do that. We click through Spotify. We actually listen to what people are saying. And I guess that would be the second best piece of advice, is listen to your audience. Like if you're a concert promoter, don't think that you know more than the audience, especially when you're like me and you're 35. Like I think I know what bands are cool right now, but like listening to the people that are buying tickets and constantly asking them like, oh, who should we put on our festival? Like that's one of the biggest reasons we've succeeded, is just admitting that we don't know everything and that our audience definitely knows better than us.
Yeah, wow. I had no idea that you were the first for the Day to Remember. That is insane.
They drove all the way from Florida to Texas to play our show, and they like, I don't think they'd ever played Texas before. Like it was crazy. Breathe Carolina had played 2 shows in Denver and then drove all the way for our Unsilent Night Festival for like $200. And they had this huge crowd. I like felt bad. I think I ended up paying them extra just because I felt bad about like how many people were excited to see them, but it was crazy.
Oh gosh. Speaking of, like drawing crowds and like the amount of people invested in music and its business, with, even with the pandemic going on, the industry is so competitive. So with people graduating college or moving to these populated areas with very big music scenes, what would be some key factors or traits for people that are seeking to get into the music industry to succeed in getting some sort of job or position?
So for me, like, I'm really bad at like being a boss. Like, I don't consider any of the people that work for me employees. They're like my friends. We work together. Like, it's just a weird concept. So for me, I'm never gonna be super good at like somebody coming in new to the team and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna train you, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. Like, it's not a standard job. It's the music industry. You either are like passionate, you love music and you're gonna make a difference in a company, or if you have to have somebody explain like how to promote shows to you and things like that, like it's not gonna work. You either wanna do it and know how to do it. I mean, there's obviously like things that I can explain to you that you probably don't know, and that's fine, but like you need to come in like knowledgeable in some form. And so what I'm getting at is like the people that have started out as like interns or just like working the door at our shows and ending up as employees, the biggest thing has been that they're just like passionate and they always want to be around. And so when somebody emails me and they're like, hey, I just moved to Dallas, like I really want to get to know the music scene a lot better, like can I come shadow you at your office a couple of days a week, or like can I come in and like give you some ideas, like things like that, versus like, hey, here's my resume, here's where I graduated, I want to do music stuff. Like there's just a difference, and like nothing against people that have a resume ready and all that, because it's obviously important, but just showing like already like, hey, I'm cool just coming in here, seeing if you like my ideas, like seeing if I can learn from you. Like you could just tell someone that's like hungry in that sense versus someone that's just throwing out resumes for a job, So like if you go back from college to your hometown or to another city and you want to work in music, like just figure out the people that you would want to work with and like let them know why. Just be like, hey, I followed you for a while. I think that what you're doing is really cool. I would love to be a part of it. I do have some of my own ideas. Like, can we grab coffee? Can we grab lunch? Can I come by your office? Like whatever it is. Don't overthink like what someone's going to read into a resume or a long email or anything. Just like keep it simple and be like, hey, I'm really passionate about music. I like what you're doing. I want to be a part of it.
Wow.
And I think, excuse me, I think that's common amongst people that run music business companies, like at least on my level, because we all just grew up as music fans. So like the idea of being like this boss or like reading a resume and like trying to like decide from somebody's email like if they're going to be good versus them just being like, hey, I'm going to come by your office, like I'd love to chat, like it's just, you already like are going to vibe with that person a lot better.
Yeah. So with them showing that initiative, that kind of just like sparks attention, like, oh, this person already has like the drive and the willingness to, participate whatever way they can. Gotcha. So, in stating that, with building your team, getting your team together and having them, do different aspects and do different things and tasks to build this conglomerate that you call Third Strings Entertainment, what were the main building blocks from like a business perspective in creating this? Like what essentially with your teammates helped you build and get a really good foundation in getting Third Strings going?
I mean, really for me, like early on, it was realizing what I'm really good at and what I need somebody else to be really good at. Like I'm really good at doing the marketing. I'm really good at getting bands, like I'm really good at the marketing. I'm really good at like networking. I'm really good at like networking with bands at the shows and like becoming friends with them and all that. I'm not good at like, I don't like advancing shows. I don't like, sending offers. I don't like basically running the show to make sure it's on time. So I always found somebody who was like the opposite of me. Like I do all the marketing and like I basically, my job should be done when the show starts other than being the owner of the company. Like I should have a team of people that takes over once the doors open for the show, and then I can focus on hanging out with the band and like building that relationship, because in a competitive market the number one thing you want to do is be friends with the artists that are coming through and like make a good impression. And like some bands that we'll have for the first time will be like, hey, do you guys want to go out afterwards? Like I'll buy you some drinks, or like there's a really good pizza place around the corner, like whatever. And it's also important to know who the bands are. Like if they're, if they don't drink or their singer used to be alcoholic, you don't really want to like offer that. And if they're, vegan, you want to kind of know those things in advance and all that. But yeah, it's just like, it's just very important to figure out like what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are, and let somebody else come in and do the things that you're not going to be good at. And so for me, like I had that person and then I replaced that person with another person that was like that. And now for the last 10 years, I've had the same business partner, and he's really good at everything that he does. I'm really good at what I do. And like together, we're just like the complete package of being able to run the company. And he's been able to train other people to like run the shows, and we have multiple shows, and I've been able to train other people to do marketing stuff if needed. But I mean, for the most part, like we're the two people that run everything.
Sounds like a dynamic duo type of situation.
Yep.
So again, in regards to Third Strings, from a business point or from an industry point, what kept you staying independent rather than going corporate or joining another like big corporate company?
I just don't want a boss. Like, even if I was like promised like, oh, you can still do your own thing, I don't like answering to people. Like my marketing company started out as just me, and then I got an investor, and it like had this nice fancy office, and he put money into like us traveling all over the United States for meetings and stuff. And this was like when I was in my early 20s, and it just like didn't work out because at some point like the dynamic shifted, and he became a boss instead of just like an investor, and like that didn't work out. But I mean, I think another thing that's been kind of kept me independent is like when I do have those conversations with like a Live Nation or an AEG or like a bigger company, they want me to pick a lane. They want to put me in a box and be like, yeah, you're a concert promoter, and we don't want you to manage artists. We don't want you to do marketing. We don't want you to do that. And like my brain doesn't work that way. Like I have this addiction, almost like the term serial entrepreneur. Like that's me. Like I'll figure out something, and like if I can't do it, then I might invest in a new idea. Like I've been talking to a couple people that have like kind of, oh my God. Sorry, that was very weird.
Oh, it's okay.
Started yelling at me. But I've been talking to a few people that have started their own business during COVID as like a kind of like a hobby. And I've been guiding them through it, and like I might end up being like a partner in companies like that, and they're just completely not music or entertainment related at all. And it's interesting to me. But like that's another thing, is like I have all this experience building businesses, that if I can help somebody else like change their hobby or passion into an actual career, like I kind of go that way. And these are all things I wouldn't have time to do if I was like answering to a boss and getting deadlines, and like, essentially with a Live Nation or AEG too, I'd be like forced to work with genres and like people I don't really want to. There's like, I don't know, it doesn't sound appealing to me. I mean, some days like we'll have like a bad month of shows or something, and I'm like, man, that set pay sounds really good. But then like we have a really good month, and I'm like, that's why I don't do it.
Yeah, it really just sounds like you're so integral and so solid, and you know what you want, what you stand by, and what you believe in as far as like music, art, and how you perceive that and how you want to project that to other people, which is really
and like
astounding.
COVID's been so eye-opening too, because like we we were at one point in talks with like a major company, and we had sent them over like all the things they asked for and they were interested. And like my only thought this last like 8 months has been, if I had done that and then COVID happened, like not only would I not be likely a part of that company anymore because pretty much everyone's been laid off, but then my whole company, my legacy, my 16 years of doing this would all be gone as well. And so like I never want to be in a position where like anyone is responsible for my future but me. Like I can get myself out of any hole that like the company gets into. I can like, I'm good at the business side, so I don't have control of that if I'd be working for someone else. And like I can't tell them like, oh yeah, you can find the money to keep me hired, or like I just like, it wouldn't work. Like if I had done that, like I probably wouldn't even technically be allowed to work in music right now with a non-compete or something like that. So definitely glad to be independent.
Yeah. Before we start to get to the conclusion here, I really just want to give you a kudos, as somebody who is not only a student, but somebody who is wanting to start like their own business, their own entertainment company, and promote themselves and work with other people. Getting to know somebody like you who's essentially established and doing what I want to do, it's really great to hear like how you built that up and where you are now and how solid you are. I really hope that other people that watch us really understand that, it's so great to be independent, but to also understand there's patience and time and there's a journey with it.
Yeah. There's ups and downs. Like I think it was Kevin Lyman that he was speaking at a conference that I was at, and he said, if you want to be a concert promoter, you need to take $10,000 out of your bank, light it on fire, and be okay watching it burn. Because it's like, it's the truth. Like if you want to be in this music business, like we'll have months where we make so much money, and then other months where we lose so much, I'm like draining my savings to keep the business afloat. And like, that's the reality. Like you can try to predict the music trends as much as you want, but then, Blink-182 could do a concert across the street and you're screwed. Like you don't get to control like the competing shows or events, or like even things in Texas with sports, like the World Series, the Super Bowl. Like if any of these teams get into a championship, no one's going to sporting, like no one's going to concerts. They're going to sports bars and watching games and stuff like that. So it's definitely, that was something that I loved hearing, because I was like, man, our whole career is a gamble. Like you're basically betting on bands and how popular they're going to be, like especially right now where shows have been moved all the way to like the end of 2021. It's like, are people going to care about that band at that point? Like, are they even doing anything during COVID to where people remember they exist? But I mean, that's the job. The rewards of your own business are great when you do well, and if you can find a way to do well, then I mean that's all you. There's no one, like the last person that gets paid in a company is always the owner of the company. And if you're the owner of the company and you're able to run something like I do, where there's only a couple of employees, you're going to get paid most of the time. But if you're the owner of a company right now that's got millions of dollars of overhead and you're struggling, like it could be a long time before you get paid.
And just getting towards the conclusion, I know the biggest question that I received in surveying students and people who would be watching is, how are you handling live shows right now? How is your company coping with not being able to host things at concert halls or venues, or in many cases even outside shows right now? Are you guys doing live streams? How is that working out?
I think I'm like the rare exception, because I'm an adapter, and so I went into the stock market. I built a studio at my house. I have marketing to fall back on and like focus on. So I've just been doing all those. Like I don't want to be another person competing in the live stream world. Like we promote, like we get added as a promoter to a bunch of these live streams, and we'll get a few bucks a ticket, but it's just like the profit margins on live streams, it's just not really there for promoters. It's meant for the bands to do like one big event and survive this. So for me, like at first it was like a couple weeks of like depression naps by like 2 p.m. every day, because the stock market was crashing and the world was ending and no shows were happening. And like, we didn't really know what was going on, because it was like, you move shows from March to May, then May to August, then August to next year, and then, all the way to fall again. And it's it's been wild. And like, I kind of saw early on that I needed to be doing other things. And like I talked to my landlord and I got our rent cut down, and I got an SBA loan to take care of paying my employees. And then from there, it's like we've just been focused on marketing, and I do the stock market stuff, and the studio is great. Like basically, I posted something the other day and I said, wake up and beat the stock market, because that's my goal every day, is to end with making money and then go to the office and do emails and then get home and hang out in the studio. And like every couple of nights there's somebody different in the studio, and I'll be in there as well. So that's kind of like filling the void of live music, is being around music being created in the studio, which is awesome. But I mean, we've been to drive-in events, we've been to a few outdoor events. I mean, we've considered things, but the profit margins are just so small, and it's like so stressful, and like it's still, you're putting people at risk no matter what you do. And I realize like bars are open, restaurants are open, amusement parks are open, but there's just kind of like this higher moral stance that the music industry seems to always take on a lot of issues, and one of them is human life right now. And to risk putting a bunch of people at risk for, you know, a couple $100 is just not worth it. Like if somebody dies from some chain of events of your show, like it wasn't worth it at all. So we're just, I mean, we had a meeting today about like a bunch of restaurants and bars that we're going to hit up about marketing, and that's kind of just the route we're going to take until it's safe to do events again. And Live Nation and Ticketmaster released their plan to get back to live music today, and it's the most intrusive and insane thing I've ever seen. I don't know if you looked at it, but basically you pay a like $15.99 medical records fee, and then you upload your proof of having a vaccine, proof of test results, but it goes through a big corporation like Clear or another one that verifies it, then sends your information to Live Nation. So basically you're giving all of these big corporations all of your health information and even more information about yourself than they already have. And I'm like, this isn't going to work, especially when 51% of the population or more is anti-vaccine and thinks that COVID is a hoax. So they're not going to give into this, and then you're gonna have lawsuits of people saying they can't be forced to be vaccinated to attend public events and blah, blah, blah. So I don't think any of that's gonna work, and I think we're gonna just be waiting a while until we can safely have events, and I would rather do that than be that intrusive to people's lives or put them at risk. There's kind of like gotta be a middle ground somewhere, but it's not there yet.
Yeah, myself included. I skimmed over that article actually just before our meeting this morning. I was just so bewildered by their terms and conditions that they listed. I was just...
You have like the smartest people at some of the biggest companies in the world coming up with the dumbest ideas. Just like, and I don't even mind that that's recorded, because that's a fact. Like, I mean, these people have been smart enough to be the #1 concert promoters in the world, and they think that this is just the idea. Like, it just shows that they're not paying attention to anything that's going on in the world. Like, we still have a contested election of all these people who don't even think COVID is real because they've been told that it's just going to magically go away. And so that's at least like, imagine trying to do a country concert right now. Like, none of those people are going to, I mean, country concerts are happening, which is a whole nother thing, and it's crazy, but it just like, it just blew my mind. I'm like, this is what you came up with? Like, you decided that was a press release? Good luck. Like, I don't know. I think the backlash alone is going to change their plan, but I talked to other promoters, and like, of course there's like that one promoter that's like, I don't care, microchip me, do what you got to do. I want to get back to music. And like, I get that. But at the same time, like, I'm not about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think we share the same ideals as far as, you know, making sure everybody stays safe and being as conscious as possible of everybody's health, everybody's life, and, you know, just being patient and waiting this out for everything to kind of just settle back into some sense of new normalcy that was pre-COVID.
Yeah.
If and when that ever happens.
Yeah, it's crazy. That's the best way to put it.
So lastly, I know a lot of students were also curious, is there any way for students to reach out to you if they have any questions or want to seek advice or guidance, or, you know, if anybody moves out to the Texas area, if there are any internship opportunities with you?
I mean, I'm on social media 24/7, so my social media is the best. Just my name at Mike Ziemer. And then I have a website that has all my contact information as well, just MikeZiemer.com. But I'm usually pretty responsive, especially if people are specific and they're like, hey, I saw your interview. I wanted to ask you some questions, and just don't send me a message that just says, hey, because I'll assume that it's spam. All those old profiles on Instagram that are like, hey, and then you click it and it's like, what are you trying to sell me? Or I don't even know. But
Right.
yeah,
Oh,
I like to be accessible. I like to be transparent. I like to talk to people. So I wish that people had been as easy to reach and talk to as I try to be when I was trying to learn things. But I mean, it was just me doing it and learning everything myself. So I try to hopefully help people avoid making the same mistakes I've made and give them advice that helps them, because it will make things a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, in just participating in this, I certainly have gained some perspective and things that I didn't even think about with shows and live streams, and building your own legacy, as you called it, which is just super great. I'm super grateful to have been a part of this. Thank you again so much for your valuable time and your knowledge. I know students are going to be really excited to be watching this.
Awesome. Yeah, it was great. I appreciate it.
All right, perfect. Well, thanks so much, Mike. Again, it was so much fun getting to know you and to interview you, and I look forward to speaking with you in the near future, hopefully.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.